There's been a lot of talk about tiny Game Boy-like emulation devices across YouTube recently. You know, stuff like the Miu Mini and the Mini Plus. Then of course, there's this guy, the Anbernic RG35XX. Another budget retro gaming handheld that can play pretty much anything all the way up to the PS1. Now, I'm no stranger to the emulation scene. Heck, I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 set up with all of my games on there. I've even done videos involving it in the past. But as someone who would much rather play games on original hardware, how am I going to take to a portable emulator that's recently been going viral? So, hello fellow gamers, and, well, having thousands of games in the palm of my hand? I kinda like the sound of that. Any of you who have watched my videos before know fine well that I much rather play games on original hardware. I mean, why the hell do you think I have all of this set up to begin with? For my health? So why on earth would I get this? Well, it's simple. This has been an interesting side project, and it's got a lot going for it as well. I love its form factor, and just how closely it resembles a DMG Game Boy. I grew up with the original Game Boy, so the nostalgia factor is strong with this one. And it's tiny. I mean, yeah, the Miu Mini is much smaller than this. But frankly, I wouldn't want this to be any smaller than it already is. It's already a good, pocketable size. It's going to be hard to play any games on this if it was shrunk any further. That screen is damn nice too. It may only be a 480p 43 aspect ratio screen, but it is bright, it is clear, and it's got great viewing angles. And lastly, well, what can I say? I love my classic retro games. Anything all the way up to the PS1 I can play on this with ease, and I can play them all anywhere. Considering it's all emulation, the support this has for so many different platforms is bloody impressive. After my tinkering, I rarely encountered any problems playing games on here. So why is it an interesting side project? Well, this is a bit of a tinkerer's dream. I mean, sure, out of the box it works and you can jump right into playing games on it. But it's not perfect. The image is soft a lot of the time, save states don't seem to work, well, at least for me they don't. A lot of the included games are Japanese ROMs rather than my preferred European ones, and it has a lazy sleep mode, because all it does is turn the screen and speaker off. It's actually still on and draining power. But a lot of these foibles can be quite easily remedied after a little mucking around with it. I got my RG35XX from Droix back in mid-February. The price seems to fluctuate on there a little bit. I got mine when it was closer to 60 quid per unit. So I've had about 3 months to carefully research what I wanted to change on this bad boy. And, you know, I'd like to think that the end result is something rather special. I wanted to run all of my changes by you all, just in case you were interested in getting one of these as well. First off, that default firmware, as far as I'm concerned, ain't up to snuff. It'll play the games it comes with, and it's got a handy search feature. But I found the image in game to be soft, save states didn't work, and it doesn't have a proper sleep mode. Luckily, the RG35XX community felt the same, and as such, there are a couple of different alternatives available. There's MinUI, which is plain and simple, it gets the job done, and turns Anbernic's little portable console into something akin to an analog pocket. There's Batocera, which is currently experimental, but it taps into the console's GPU, so it can even support N64 emulation. That's pretty impressive. But in the end, I went with the third option, GarlicOS. It has support for a lot of different systems and, most importantly, it's stable with a heap of support behind it. If you've mucked around with a Miu Mini, you'll recognise this as almost a carbon copy of Onion OS, which is a custom firmware available on that. So if you're familiar with that, this might be your go-to for this one too. The RG35XX includes 2 microSD slots. So what I did was I put GarlicOS alone on a smaller card in the first slot, and all of my ROMs on a larger card in the second slot. This means I can add more ROMs in the future without potentially disrupting the OS, and I can update the OS to newer versions without touching any of the ROMs. The ROMs I included on this cover all of your usual retro systems, you know, NES, Mega Drive, Game Boy Advance, that sort of stuff. But I can even emulate my Amiga games on here. I mean, sure, many of them will need a mouse and or keyboard, but that's something I'll be exploring in the future. GarlicOS has had a lot of support over the last few months, and extra features added along the way. For one, it has a fully working sleep mode, improved button mapping, and a whole number of bug fixes. It also brings with it RetroArch, meaning it comes with all of the benefits that brings, such as a fast forward option which I've found particularly useful. It's really handy for those kind of RPGs that require a lot of grinding. You don't want to be wasting time grinding in a game, especially on a battery powered device. There's also the option to overclock or even underclock the CPU. This is really useful when running more demanding games, and even not so demanding games actually. For example, I can underclock the CPU when playing Game Boy games, so the battery will last longer. With this new firmware as well, it meant I could customize it a bit, make it my own. To start off, I put a custom theme on there. This is a GBA inspired theme I found on Reddit, which I rather like actually for its colour scheme and pixelated composition. I did have to tweak the tiles used for some of the consoles though. Even though they provided graphics for all of the regional variations, it was defaulting to the American ones. And of course, I wasn't going to stand for that. I also adjusted the text positioning and recreated all of the game artwork. These needed to be all redone so that they all appeared in the correct place down the left hand side, and of course, scaled appropriately. As you can imagine, this was a tall order for every game I had on here. This definitely took a while to do. Now, even after having installed GarlicOS and given it a makeover, I felt it could do with a few more tweaks, just to tailor it to my own personal preference. So I set out to change a number of its default settings. First off, I set the video scaling to keep the aspect ratio so the games aren't stretched to fill the screen. I mean, for some of them, it isn't so bad if it does that, but for others, ugh. I also went ahead and enabled threaded video. This is mostly for the Amiga games, so they ran a lot smoother. I didn't notice it make any difference for any of the other platforms, though I could be wrong. I also turned off the fast forward notification. RetroArch gives you the option to turn various different screen notifications on or off, and when using the fast forward feature, it was by default showing fast forward at the bottom of the screen all of the time. It was so annoying. In fact, it would cover up a lot of in-game dialogue. I decided to turn this off so I could just use the feature unimpeded. This wasn't to be the end of the tweaking though. An issue some people have reported with the RG35XX, and one that I can echo as well, is that D-pad. It feels alright, but it isn't quite accurate. When pressing left and right, it would often register up and down as well. This is a pain when precise input is key. I went ahead and fixed this by opening it up and putting down some electrical tape between the D-pad contacts. This reduces the area that the D-pad could touch whenever it's pressed, and it made a big difference, especially in games like Pokemon. There are a couple of other changes that are discussed in the RG35XX community, which I decided not to go with. The first of these is to replace the battery with a higher capacity one. Now as standard, it's supposed to come with a 2100 mAh battery, if you believe what the label on the back tells you. But it turns out at some point, Anbernic started putting higher capacity batteries in these anyway. The one I have here is labelled as having a 2100 mAh battery, but actually inside it's got a 2600 one instead. And besides, a lot of the bigger batteries that people have been getting on sites like AliExpress, claiming to be 3500, they actually aren't at all. Turns out a lot of them are actually closer to 2800 instead, which ain't that much more than what I've already got. So given how hit and miss the batteries are from these sites, I decided not to bother changing mine. It lasts long enough as it is anyway. Another fix people have been recommending is a replacement for the rear shoulder buttons. The RG35XX adopts this horizontal layout for the shoulder buttons, which I get, considering its form factor, but because of that, a lot of people don't find them all that comfortable for extended use. The standard ones are quite flat all the way along, but the new ones you can buy online, they raise the central L2 and R2 buttons so your fingers presumably rest better on them. But to be frank, I don't overly mind the buttons already on there. They work just fine for me, and replacing them runs the risk of breaking it. Besides, you only really need all of these for PS1 games anyway. One last thing I wanted to do was ensure that my console was protected if I ever took it anywhere. There's no official case for it that I'm aware of, so instead I went ahead and grabbed one of those hard drive travel cases from Amazon. It seems like the perfect size for this. It has an elasticated band inside that keeps the console in place, and a pouch on the other side to store like the charging cable and a mini HDMI cable. In case I wanted to plug it in a TV wherever I was as well. This isn't a hack or a tweak or anything, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of tweaking with this, and now it's at a point where I would say it's a fantastic little portable console, loaded with a whole bunch of my own games, and I can take it with me anywhere I want. It's a much nicer experience now compared to what it was like straight out of the box. Even just having working save states on there has absolutely transformed it. So far, I've mostly been playing Pokemon Crystal and Leaf Green on this. Having working save states and that fast forward option really makes playing through these a doddle. Though I have dabbled in a handful of other games as well. It's a bit strange, well at least for me anyway, to be able to play through my Amiga games on a tiny portable console. But this is just where we are now, and it's absolutely fantastic. So there you have it, the Anbernic RG35XX, a very capable and affordable little emulation device that will work for you out of the box, but it's also flexible enough to allow you to tinker with it to your liking. I would definitely recommend one of these. I'm also so happy I can finally talk about this. I've had to keep stum for months, right? Because when I picked this up in February, I also got another one for a dear friend of mine for their birthday, and that's only just been and gone. They follow me on YouTube, they follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, on Twitch, everywhere. They are very supportive. But that meant I couldn't post a thing about it because, well, I didn't want to give the game away, you know? So was all of that wait worth it? Well, after seeing that happy face, I would say yes, absolutely. So on that note, I'm going to head off, so thanks very much for watching. What do you think of the Anbernic RG35XX? Is it something you'd consider in order to play your games anywhere? And if you have, do you know of any further changes you'd make to it? Let everyone know down below in the comments. And hey, while you're down there, a like is always appreciated if you enjoyed the video. And there's always that subscribe button if you want to hear more from me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.